Welcome to the French and Pickering Creeks Conservation Trust third Thursday lecture series. People always wonder what this is. It's the third Thursday lecture series, co-sponsored by the French and Pickering and Historic Yellow Springs. I'm Penny Hunt, member of the French and Pick Board of Directors, and I'm filling in for Bill Gladden, who's been called out of town on family business, and we wish him well. Our presentation, the purchase of the Pew Estate, the easement that saved 550 acres, will take you behind the scenes of this huge project from start to finish. Cary, Leptuck, who was president at the time, will cover the purchase and the selling of the property. Ed Rosen, who with his wife Dolly now own Warwick Furnace Farm, have miraculously transformed it, and we will hear from Ed about that. I will follow with a story of our 108-acre preserve that is owned by French and Pickering. So, Cary, ready?
Thanks, Penny. I welcome the stalwarts who made it here today. I remind everybody we didn't have heat in 1737, so sometimes we bring us back. This makes some authenticity. So I thank Historic Yellow Springs for having us here, and we are going to talk about that. We're going to talk about how we saved 550 acres, and there's more to those 550 acres than just the land itself. You'll find there's a lot of history. And there's certainly present day commerce going on there and restoration.
Yeah.
The site you see there is actually part of the grounds. That's from the upper, almost to the top of the Bentley Preserve, looking down towards the manor house, which is behind those trees. So you get some idea of the land we're talking about. A very brief history.
You have to stay where the camera is.
Oh, okay. Well, they don't want to look at me. They want to look at that. A brief history, and very brief because talking about the history of that land is a subject of a couple of other lectures that we could spend time on. But the Warwick Furnace, which is the center of the activity there, was built in 1737-38 by Samuel Nutt Jr., Anna Nutt and Samuel Savage. They were all heirs of Iron Master Samuel Nutt, who had been in the business of producing iron in this area before that furnace was built. Reading Furnace was built a year earlier than this, in 1736. Samuel Nutt's Jr.'s widow, Rebecca, he died pretty quick. He died pretty soon after they built the forge, and he was a pretty young man. He was still in his 30s. But she remarried. She married Robert Grace. For those of you who've been around a long time, have heard about the Grace mines and so on. And Grace itself turned into a very large corporation through the years. But he was, Robert Grace was a close friend of Ben Franklin's. And there's a lot of stories about Ben Franklin in this area, and particularly his involvement at the furnace. But it also speaks to probably why the first Franklin stove was cast at Warwick in 1741, and many, many, many more were cast after that. The furnace was owned by Nutt descendants and their relatives, Potts, as in Pottstown, Rudders, etc., until finally closing in the late 1860s. I think it was 1867 or 68. It finally shut down its fires, and that was really because charcoal was no longer needed to make iron. They were using coal, and it could be done in more urban settings. It didn't need large tracts of wood to make charcoal, and steel making had really progressed greatly. During the Revolutionary War, Warwick supplied cannons and ammunition, cannonballs, etc., for the defense of Philadelphia. And that's in quotes because that was their charge from the Committee on Safety of Philadelphia, which was set up to defend the city. Later on during the war, it supplied all the war efforts, but originally it was to make cannons for use in the Philadelphia area. In 1835, David Potts Jr. bought from a Rudder relative. They were all involved. the Warwick Farm. Warwick Farm was a separate piece of property. It was east of the furnace tract. And he bought that piece to go along with the furnace tract. And they totaled about 1,300 acres between the two at the time. And he enlarged the farmhouse in 1850. Ed's going to tell you more about that. This is, I think many of you are familiar with it, but just very, very briefly, I know you can't see this very well, but these were all the tax tracts in the area. Up here, let me switch this back to that. Up here is Route 23, Ridge Road, Ridge Pike there. Warwick Furnace Road comes down here. And right in here is where the manor property, as we call it, that the Rosens are going to talk about, is right there. The furnace itself is right here. And the property extended, basically, I'm going to trace it here quickly as to what we got involved with. And it came up here. Up here was also part of the Pew tract at one time, and it was sold off by other Pew family members. This is early in the 30s and 40s and 50s and 60s. Some of you may have seen this. This is I think this was 1803. This was a rendering of the furnace. And so it's about standing about where our parking lot is there now, if you're familiar with it. Here's the furnace itself. The stone furnace with the Bosch pit behind there. It's hidden by these buildings right now. The charcoal house, which is up here. And this was the charging house where the charcoal was brought in, as was the iron ore brought up and the limestone brought in. It was loaded in the top of the furnace. And the iron came out down the bottom. It was a pretty simple process. This is the shot of the charcoal house when we first took it over. These are the two outside wall, as if we're standing in that same parking lot looking up the hill. You can see the back wall back there. But this is how ingrown it was. All this timber had to be removed, and there was a lot of that around the rest of the furnace. Here's the Bosch pit itself. When we took it over, with a big walnut tree sitting in the middle of it. And this is the house that sits on the corner, the ruins of the house that sit on the corner that you saw very much in the corner of that one slide of the painting. Here's pretty much the way things look now. Our goal here was to stabilize the ruins, not to restore them. So this is not going to be like Hopewell or Joanna. Yep. So here's that Bosch pit again. Charcoal house up here on top, and this whole area was cleaned out. So that's a little bit of where we were. The deal itself, Warwick Furnace Farm, both tracts were bought by the Pews in 1927. Joseph Pew, the Jr., was the son of Joseph Pew, who's the guy who founded Sun Oil. So there was a little bit of money in the family. This was only one of a bunch of residences. Their main mansion is still there on a County Line Road in Radnor. It's now a conference center, I think, for Villanova, but it's still basically there. They had several properties. It was used as a country house and a hunting preserve. It was listed on the National Register of Historic Places in 1976, and one of the signatories to that application was our own Eleanor Morris, one of the founders of the trust. So there's been a lot of interest in that property through the years. So here comes Joseph Pew III. He takes over from his father, Jr. He passes away, and now he's got an estate. And his estate decides that they want to sell the entire property, what was left of the entire property, which was 550 acres at this point. They developed what's it worth, how could they sell it, who would buy it. They hired a consultant, of course, and did a as of building rights study. And that study showed that it covered 550 acres. I mentioned that you could develop 88 home sites. And that was only limited because there's a lot of steep slopes and wetlands on that property. But even 88 was a little over 6 acres a site, if you want to look at it that way. You say, well, that's not bad. but of course, the sensitivity of the land was really what mattered here. That property has always been one of what we call critical importance. We at the trust have a plan. It's our strategic conservation plan, we call it, and there's properties targeted all over our service area that we're after. We've got a lot of them. We're after for easements and for preservation. And this was very, very high up on the list because of its size, its incredible view shed. It's one of the most beautiful places you want to see. I have high value there, which it was at the time. It's now considered an exceptional value stream by the State Department of Conservation and Natural Resources, which is the highest rank for stream quality. And of course, the flora and fauna that are there. So we first had, now here comes Joseph Pew IV, Dr. Joe. He was a physician. He was he was the only maverick in a family who didn't go in the oil business. And that's a whole nother story I'll tell you later if you want to hear it. A great guy, lived in Oley. He was the only one that lived nearby. And he was the designated negotiator for the 8 beneficiaries, all members of the Pew family, who were the beneficiaries of the Pew Trust. So they were the ones that were getting the money out of selling this property. So they had, of course, a vital interest. By 2013, well, we had started to work him over a little bit just to build some relationships. And he was a very, he kept very distant, as a lot of very wealthy people do, because they're always thinking somebody's going to pick their pocket. And it took a lot of time just to get him to sit down with us and talk. But by 2013, we had done enough of that to get him to consider a conservation plan. And I put that in quotes because that's what it was, as far as we saw. We were going to conserve those 550 acres as an alternative to development. And he agreed with 2 basic negotiations, considerations for negotiation. Number 1, the sale would be no less than the appraised price of $14.5 million.
The appraisal, was there negotiations on who was going to appraise and how many?
Oh, they had an appraisal done. They had a couple of appraisals done when they were doing the land planning and so on. And we've had a whole bunch of appraisals done afterwards. So,
okay, so that was agreed upon appraised price.
That was their appraised price, and it was agreed upon by him. And that was sort of, we didn't have a lot of cards on our side of the table. So, and the second thing was the sale was closed no later than the end of 2015. So this was now, but about the end of 2013, we got him to agree to this. So in early 2014, and the French and Pickering Creeks Conservation Trust Board, who had been discussing this all along, believe me, we've had many discussions, approved, quote, moving forward with the negotiations. There was a lot of negotiating that had to happen. So this was just, you have the approval to go and keep talking. You can imagine that one of the big subjects was where the hell are we going to get $14.5 million, which we had nowhere near that. And I put one quote here because sort of that last meeting, one of the final hammer blows that was placed by Stock Ottaway. Some of you may know Stock. He's been a member of this board for many years. He has just resigned recently. But he was also the son-in-law of Eleanor and Sam Morris, so he had quite a bit of a history with trust. And he said, if we don't save this property, we might as well go out of business. I think what he said was, we damn well might go out of business, or maybe even worse than that. But basically what he was saying, if we can't do this, what the hell are we in business for? And that sort of sealed the deal as far as we were concerned. We said, we don't know how we're going to do it, but we're going to do it. We knew we needed partners. The plan was to sell large conservation lots. If you're familiar what's happened with other big conservation, Brinco is another example, where large conservation lots were sold off as a way to raise money to save. That we would do that. They would all be put under permanent easement, which would limit future development rights. And French and Pickering would keep a portion of the land. It turned out to be 108 acres. including the furnace and portion of the French Creek as a public nature preserve, which is now the Thomas P. Bentley Nature Preserve. So after 2 years of negotiation with the Pews and working our way through all kinds of issues and obtaining funding, finding and obtaining funding, the sale was closed on December 8th of 2025, only 13 days to spare.
2015.
20, oh, that's a typo, I'm sorry. Yeah, I was gonna say, this is 2025, yeah. Thank you, Tyler.
That's in close.
2015, seems like only yesterday. At the same time, a number of parcels were sold, totaling 379 acres, were sold to nearby landowners and conservationists, underlying conservationists, Ray and Terry Bentley, for the appraised value and with protective easements. There was essentially on each of those large parcels, there was one building right, which will probably in their lifetime never be used. But so one house could be built on 40 acres in one case and 45 in another, and so on. Our board required that the sale of the Manor House parcel, which totaled 63 acres. Now, Manor House parcel, we're talking the Iron Master's house, is on Warwick Furnace Road. There's several accessory buildings, and there's 3 huge barns, huge, huger, and hugest in that order, that go with it, and 63 acres went to owners. Our number one criteria was we wanted people who were going to steward the land, take care of it, love it, work with us, work with the trust. And of course, we're able to buy it. And we found some folks that did that. Ed and Dolly Rosen, you're going to hear from Ed in a minute here. And after extensive meetings and discussions with Warwick Township and residents of Warwick Township, I didn't point out on that map that most of the land is in Warwick Township. The creek is actually the township dividing line. So when you go over that bridge on Valley Road, you're into East Nantmeal. We had a lot of discussions with the folks in Warwick, and we finally worked things through. So late 2016, I don't remember the date of that one, Ed. I don't know if you do, but we finally did it.
June 27th.
June 27th, give or take. I knew it was June, yeah.
2027.
2027. Last slide for me says, here were our partners. I'm putting numbers on this because it doesn't matter, because they are all very much involved with helping us do this. Warwick Township and East Nantmeal Township both contributed from their open space funds towards the preserve, helping us buy the 108 acres of the preserve from ourselves, but the money had to come from somewhere. Chester County Commissioners, the county open space funds, donated close to $1 million, about $900,000. That was split between 2 grants that we and our cooperating conservation group, Natural Lands, the county had a $500,000 limit on a grant that they'd give. So we each got grants, and they totaled up to about $900,000. And we do work with our sister brother agencies. We all have the interest of saving the land, so it's not a competition. The Pennsylvania Department of Conservation and Natural Resources, DCNR, gave us some money for the preserve. Open Space Institute was working for the William Penn Foundation. They were spending the William Penn Foundation's money, and they gave us money for the preserve. The Conservation Fund is a national not-for-profit group that provides essentially bridge loans for organizations to do deals, especially when you're doing conservation lots like we are. We needed to have the cash to buy it to then resell it like a developer would. Some of it came from our financial reserves, almost $2 million when it was all over. Ray and Cary Bentley, as I mentioned, the conservation partners, and the Rosens buying that property, and countless friends and benefactors. A lot of them are in this room. So we thank you. I'm done with my part, and I didn't stand probably where I was supposed to. So, but Ed.
You're welcome to stand in the middle.
A man who needs no introduction, Ed Rosen.
Okay. I'm gonna test this. Got it. Good. Okay. This is obviously a drone shot of the pretty much all of Warwick Furnace Farm as it exists today. On the bottom right, Cary, did you have a laser pointer? Can I borrow that? These are the major barns. The Iron Masters mansion is here, and the gardens are here, and there are a number of sort of accessory buildings up to the left. These are currently the lavender fields on the property. This is the Iron Masters house, pretty much as we purchased it. It was overall in pretty good condition, except for some problems emanating from water infiltration at various points, which is one of the very first things that we had to deal with. This is the rear of the house. And what you can't see, but was a troubling issue, is that the property sloped to the back of the house. So there was a significant amount of water infiltration and pocket rot in the timbers that needed to be addressed. And when we thought about solving that problem, we also thought that would be a good place for a kitchen, because for a house of that size, the original kitchen was extremely small. In the front of the property, along this walkway, this was pitched in over the years towards the house, so there was a significant amount of water that caused all kinds of problems inside with efflorescence. It was hard to maintain paint on the walls. That was completely deconstructed, rebuilt, pitched, doweled into the stone walls, and solved the problem of water infiltration from the front of the house. Aha. This is the back of the house where the water infiltration problem was. And as you can see, it's been regraded. The grade used to be up the top of this wall, and it was moved down so that we no longer had water infiltration. Why does this keep happening? And this is the new kitchen and mudroom addition, designed by John Milner of John Milner Architects and his team for us. In fact, John was really the steward of our entire restoration project. A wonderful man, very talented architect. I'm sorry, this window keeps popping up. Okay, there was a lot of damage. There's a lot of architectural woodwork done by R. Brognard Oakey, who was the architect for the Pew family when they purchased the property, and he did an extensive amount of renovation in the period from 1929 to 1931. But by the time we purchased the property, all of this was rotted. White oak woodwork had been replaced with pressure treated. All of his beautiful beaded details were eclipsed by the replacements. And so we've redone pretty much all of that woodwork you can see here. This is completely redone. This was redone. And there was a lot of railing details and fences in the gardens, and they were rebuilt as well. This is the garden next to the manor house, which was one of the nicest attributes of the property. We were fortunate to get as a gift from Rennie Moran this Thomas Sears architectural drawing of the garden as he had designed it for the Pews. And so we undertook, one of the first projects we started was the renovation of the garden. This is the existing condition of the garden when we got there. It really lost all of its shape, all of its features, was largely overgrown. And the renovation basically included everything, taking it all down, taking the original soil out, marking all of the plants of interest. You can see some of the steps here in the restoration of the structure of the garden. And what you see here is we took all of the plants that were of any that were noteworthy and tagged them, and they were moved out of the garden temporarily. And then all of the soil was excavated and put up there so that we could see what was in there that didn't present itself at the time, so that as things came up, they were then brought back into the garden. And this is what the garden looks like after the restoration project. Okay, now to the major buildings. So this is what the front of the large dairy barn looked like at the time of the purchase. And this is the back with 3 silos. The middle silo was taken down because it was a critical element of preventing water infiltration. To give you some idea of the water infiltration problem, this is the bank wall, the back of the barn at the bottom. It was just covered in algae. The 4-bay beams, you can get an idea from this of the sort of the condition of the siding. This beam is typical of what we encountered. You can see there's a crack here and the beam is significantly deflected. As it turns out, all of the beams were undersized. It wasn't just a question of age. They were just not sized large enough for the structure. So the entire 4-bay came down. And these are some shots rebuilding the 4-bay. This was the deconstruction of the silo that was a major source of water infiltration. This shows you, this is characteristic of the second floor. You can see almost all of the decking is gone. This is a picture of that space now after the renovations. It's largely used as an art gallery. My daughter is a fine art photographer, Claire Rosen, and she displays art, but she also runs artist residency programs. And in the gallery, she'll display the art that's created during those residencies. This is the corner of the barn. Inside here, this is poison ivy, which my daughter
Draped herself in.
discovered only after she had tried with her bare hands to tear it out. And this is that space now. It's currently a farm store. So this is the before and after of that large barn. $5 to the person who can guess which was the before picture. And here's the before and after of the rear of this barn. Next to that barn is a barn called the Pony Barn because it has about 20 horse stalls. And you can see it's very interesting and innovative structural design. The front half of this building here was held up by 2x4s screwed together as L's on top of cinder block from Lowe's. And your point is? So that we basically repeated the beams and post structure, hid them. Here's an example to supplement the support. The doors didn't fit because the building had shifted, and it was a right mess. And this is a picture that shows you this building, the new roof, all new siding, whatever structural infirmities that existed were remedied. And this is what that barn looks like now. This is a very interesting barn. Not sure what the vintage of it was, but there were two sort of structural, not structural, but sort of important issues that we felt we needed to deal with. One was this overhang, which is extremely, much longer than it ought to have been, and was deflecting. And then this is part of the caretaker's apartment. And you can see in this picture, we took this back and we rebolstered it so that it was no longer sagging and expanded that space. The most interesting space in this barn is this second floor above the stables, which I'll show you. Cary will remember this with great delight. This is what it looked like when we bought it. Now, these may look like piles of cannonballs, but they're not. It's bird scat. And French and Pick had to hire an environmental firm in suits to come in and take it out. And it was so bad, the floors were in great shape, but it had got, all the bird scat had gotten between the boards and underneath. So for health reasons, we had to pull up the whole floor and go underneath and vacuum it all out. And
Isn't there a carcass in there?
there were several carcasses. This is sort of the before, and this is what that space looks like today. But to keep it in this way, what we had to do, and we didn't want to alter the external appearance of this barn because it's unusual and it has the slits that were used for ventilation where grain and hay were stored. We put in polycarbonate to block the windows. Didn't stop the birds from trying to fly in. So then we put blue masking tape on the polycarbonate so the birds could see that there was something they shouldn't fly into. This is one of the tenant houses on the property. It was, the timbers had largely rotted. I mean, you can see here, there's a lot of patching with, I don't know what, probably quickcrete from Lowe's. There were timbers that had completely rotten away and were just covered over. This is all covered, this black stuff is basically roofing tar. Now, I was very critical of this, but the caretaker did that because he wasn't given any other resources with which to protect this building. And while it was a terrible thing in some ways for the building, it's probably the only reason why the building is still standing and we were able to restore it. So credit to the caretaker for that. And here's this is some of the progress taking out the cement that should have been chinking and removing the tar. That was an extraordinary effort. And so this shows you the difference between that corner before and after, and this is the front of it after it had been restored. The inside was also interesting. You can see the wood was compromised and stained, and the plaster was missing and also stained. This is what it looked like. This is what it looks like now after the restoration of the plaster and the woodwork inside. And that's a picture of the downstairs of that building. This was a kennel which housed a breed of pointers that Alberta Pew was recognized for having bred, and it was an internationally recognized breed. And there were, each dog had its own archway, and there were concrete blocks and fencing between each of the arched doors. This is what it looked like pretty much in the beginning. Some of the pens have been removed, and this is after its restoration. Penny, how am I doing on time?
Great.
Okay, this is another cottage. The household help for the Pews lived here. This was a particularly interesting building. It had no foundation, no footing, no sill plate. The had very unusual insulation, which probably started life white or pink, but when the time we got there, it was all black. And it was basically a habitat for wildlife. This gives you an idea. This is after we had toured it. That kind of gives you an idea of what the condition of the building was. And this is mid-restoration. It's not finished yet. The stone's been put up, but it hasn't been pointed yet. This is an addition. And you can see this from the uphill side of the building.
Yeah, the view.
It's the nicest, I'm sorry, it's the nicest view on the property. It looks up to the lavender on the upside. It looks down both to a little pond and to the furnace down below. I wish we had those views in the manor house. Okay, and as many of you may know, the Pews ran the farm as a dairy operation. It was an award-winning dairy operation as well. But with Cary's assiduous efforts to get the preservation of the property by French Creek that is now the Thomas P. Bentley Preserve, there's no longer any turnout or grazing for cattle. So it was the end of the dairy era for the farm. And so it is now a lavender farm. And this is just, I'll just quickly go through some of these slides sort of showing the process of building the lavender fields. You can see we have create raised beds, cover them, put holes in them, plant flowers in them. And if you're lucky, you get something like this at the end of it. We harvest the lavender. These are some bundles. These are harvested lavender flowers for distillation. This is half of the distillery where the lavender is distilled into essential oil and hydrosol. This gives you a sort of an idea of the process. You can see or maybe you can't. You can see this is what comes out of the still. It's essential oil and lavender floral water, also called hydrosol. And you can see early on the water separates out through the bottom into the large carboy, and the essential oil floats on the top. From those distillates, we make a range of products on the farm, all of them having a lavender theme. This is the family, most of whom are responsible for creating those products and selling them. And we're fortunate enough at the end of the day to have this wonderful and bucolic view shed, as Cary described, with the background of the Thomas P. Bentley Preserve. Now it's up to you, Penny.
That was fabulous, Ed. Aren't we lucky that you all have that property? I mean, that's just incredible. As property was being dispersed, French and Pickering saved 108 acres for a preserve to encourage members and all people to enjoy nature walks, trails, and the furnace site. The preserve was pushed off from shore by the Bentley brothers, and it is named for their father, the Thomas P. Bentley Nature Preserve. It opened officially in September 14, 2029. Oh, good. That's what's there. The area around the furnace was cleared. Let's see what we have here. Yeah. Was cleared and reclaimed, and the ruins of the 1737 furnace were stabilized. Appropriate fencing was used to mark paths, and many miles of trails were organized in the meadow and wooded area across Valley Way. And those colors represent trails that are there today. Beautiful trails. Kestrel boxes were added, and we engaged in banding of the chicks. Thank you. With Claudia Winters and Steve Eisenhower from Natural Lands. Isn't that beautiful? Oh. To keep 108 acres in good condition for our members and the public, we were able to build a storage barn with help from Ray and Terry Bentley that met the historic and environmental requirements of Warwick Township. It's a very pretty building and a good addition to the landscape. With all this in place, our programming for the public has grown. We offer 2 educational walks at the preserves and a lecture at historic Yellow Springs each month. A highlight is our annual bird tree decoration in the upper meadow, peanut butter, pine cones, and bird seeds. A wonderfully messy and delightful afternoon is capped off at sunset with the lighting of the tree. We've planted over 2,000 native trees with a very good survival rate. Volunteers have made this possible. Of course, the amazing organization for these days, these planting days, by Jim Moffett, our beloved preserves manager, made it all possible and enjoyable. He gets it all organized. Volunteers come in, everything is there, and the work gets done in a day or two. It's amazing. We have a special group that always helps too. It's called Siwa. They don't have a charity of their own, but they lend helping hands to other charities who need a help on days like these. It's such a wonderful idea, I think, and they're always ready to go. Look at that. It's great. Okay, the Stroud Water Research Center continues their multi-year monitoring program to assess the health of the South Branch of the French Creek that runs through the preserve. They examine aquatic insects in the creek to determine the water quality. And as Cary mentioned, it's exceptional water quality. We're really lucky, but we've gone out of our way to make that happen too. So it's working. Okay, digging up cannons. Who knew that would happen? With the help of drone-based magnetometry and ground-penetrating radar funded by Ray Bentley, several possible areas were located that could actually be one of the revolutionary cannons produced at Warwick in 1777. With team guidance from Ray, assisted by Jim Moore, a cannon was unearthed. And then 3 more were found too. This made it possible to showcase one at the furnace ruins. Let's see, and to have a loaner cannon for local historic sites, museums, and various festivals to borrow on their special day. French and Pickering has also given one of the to the Chester County Historic Center, who are planning a special display outside their beautiful building in Westchester. The cannons also brought, the cannons also brought Dan Graham to us, an ardent researcher and writer on the iron industry. Dan, along with French and Pickering, has published a book on the cannons themselves, the history of the cannons, the digging up of the cannons. It's a wonderful book. And shortly he'll be coming out with a book totally dedicated to the Warwick Furnace. These will be great additions to our celebrations of the 250th. So, biking. Biking via the Iron Tour, our major fundraiser in the spring, is always big in this area because of our wonderful country roads and beautiful views. This often used bike repair station, that's what this is, a bike repair station at the furnace, was funded by the Marshall Reynolds Foundation. It's nice to have, perfect place to have it too. Our duplex along Warwick Furnace Road provides housing for Jim Moffett and a room where volunteers can gather to learn the essentials before heading out to battle the invasives. The renovation was funded by Jim and Joan Moore. Good. Let's see what we have here. Let's see. Oh, yes, there it is. A Bluebird Trail is now up and going at the preserve, along with its own volunteer care group. We have 26 boxes. In 2023, we had 35 fledglings, and in 2024, we had 41 fledglings. So it continues. Several trail programs are offered every month. Environmental and nature experts lead these topics with topics from tree identification to kids in the creek to wetland management and many more. Oh, you know what? I think I can tell you some things here. Yes, there we go. In 1976, there were 792 acres eased in this area, as you can see. And in 2009, there were 1,377 acres. And in 2018, there were 3,594 acres eased. Yes. The Pew Estate project pushed the envelope for all. And today we have this beautiful valley producing clean air, clean water, wildlife habitat, and great enjoyment for all. So thanks, everyone. Yeah, that's good. We're going to have some time for questions, but I just want to let you know that next month, we'll be hearing from an easement holder who protects her amphibian crossings. It's a really wonderful thing to see. And in March, we'll be talking about a lawn to meadow program and how you can get started in early spring to make that transition if you'd like. So there's so many good stories, and we hope we'll see you all then. But in the meantime, are there any questions for any of these presenters? Yes, John.
I have a hypothetical question to ask Dolly and Ed Rosen.
Okay, it's a hypothetical question for Dolly and Ed Rosen.
If you had an opportunity to venture out at another time in your life and to find a property of your dreams, would one of the criteria be with fewer or more buildings on it?
Fewer, okay.
In other words, more open space, less things to fix up and to put things into.
Yes.
So the moral of the story is, I could say quietly with Penny, we made the same damn mistake. We bought a farm that had too many buildings on it that had to be renovated, re-roofed. We didn't have to go through the water problems. Sometimes we just shut our eyes, but boy, I tell you.
Well, that's the beautiful thing. And Ed and Dolly, moved into Warwick Furnace that has Warwick Township that has all sorts of, thank goodness, controls on historic buildings in the area. And so they were, in a position to need to keep them up and need to restore them if possible. And they went far and beyond what everyone expected. It's absolutely beautiful. So thank you all again. And here's a question.
We're using all the buildings. I just want to say that. We never dreamt that we would use all of
Yeah.
them. We would use the root cellar for part of an art exhibit. I mean, every
Yeah.
building.
Everything that you all have created at that farm reaches out beyond, that brings people to an understanding of all of this. Their product is sold at Winterthur, Longwood Gardens, the flower show. They go to the farmers market 2 or 3 every weekend. And it has been, I'm sure, a labor of love, but definitely a labor to create the beautiful things that you have. Yeah. Jim?
I've got a comment, that the income pays for the taxes. and the rent.
Taxes. I'll
What income?
This is this project is a way to make a small fortune from the water.
Yeah.
So one of the comments was on the cannon, the spare cannon is going to Chester County History Center. They're having a fundraising dinner in April. Get the money to build a shelter for their cannon. I'm not sure what the plans are, but I know it. Thought we'd get that out, but there is a
25th, right?
25th.
Yeah.
April 25th, the fundraiser at the History Center for to raise money for the cannon shelter. That'll be a wonderful addition there too. That'll be great.
And the other cannon is going down in the Philadelphia?
No,
No. Ray has one of the cannons.
But one was gonna go to the Revolutionary Museum.
No, it's going to Chester County.
Okay, cool.
We got a home for all four. We have to dig up some more.
everybody wants one, right? No, it's wonderful that we have. Any other questions? If not, we will end, and thank you all for coming and enduring the cold. We have no heat here and everybody's in their hats and coats, but it's been a great presentation. So thank you. And